And to those members of the public who will be joining us shortly, can I first remind you, please, to have your mobile phones on silent. This is the first virtual full council meeting which we at South Hams have held. Members, you will all have received a copy by email of the protocol for remote formal decision-making meetings, and this will underpin how this meeting will be conducted. I would ask you all to please try and abide by the protocol which has been formulated by our officers. Our officers have worked extremely hard under difficult circumstances to get this form of meeting operational, and for that I do sincerely thank them. Members, I would remind you that this virtual meeting will be webcast. So we will then move on to the agenda proper, and the first item on the agenda is, when I find my right page, is the minutes of the meeting which was held on the 13th of February 2020 to be approved as a true and correct copy, a record of that meeting. Members, are you all in favour? Anyone who's not in favour has a question to ask, please do so now. Otherwise, we will assume everyone is in favour. Thank you. Darryl?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just add one point? Councillor Pannell rightly picked up an error in the draft minutes, which I've since picked up, and it relates to minute 7219, and it was a missing number being 15. We've since picked that up. The website version is now corrected, and I thank Councillor Pannell for that spot. Thank you.
Thank you, Darryl. Is Councillor Pannell happy with that?
Yes, very happy, thank you.
Thank you. Therefore, we'll move on to item 2, urgent business. At present, no items of urgent business have been raised. Item 3, exempt information. There may be a need to divide the agenda should members wish to discuss any aspects of the appendix when we get to agenda item 7. Item 4, declarations of interest. Members, I invite you to declare any personal or discusable pecuniary interest. Any declarations will need to state if the interest is personal or is disclosable pecuniary and the nature of that interest. Has anyone any interest to declare, please? No? Okay. Item 4, business brought forward by the chairman. I have no business brought forward at this point in time. Thank you. Item 6 is the remote meetings draft procedure rules. I will ask Councillor Pearce to introduce this item, please. Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Can you hear me all right?
Yes,
yep.
I can.
Thank you. Okay, so this report sets out the circumstances for remote meetings. How they will be carried out is set out in the procedure rules in the appendix. Since the beginning of the pandemic emergency, the Council has had to change dramatically the way it works. Our focus is now on helping the vulnerable in our communities and shielding the most vulnerable. We have been given the huge and important task of allocating the grants to all eligible businesses in the district on behalf of the government. And helping the local economy to take off will be the next huge task we shall have to carry out as we emerge from all this. Because of the lockdown, we are nearly all working from home, which presents its own logistical challenges to working normally, as many officers also have children at home and so are having to work out of office hours to fulfil their schedules. The majority of officers are now redeployed on emergency response work. This means that the single team of officers we have to service both councils simply does not have the capacity to service the full spread of annual scheduled programme of member meetings. And it's necessary to follow the legislation which says that only essential strategic decisions will be taken. Under the legislation, the annual council meeting will be suspended until May 2021, and all committee and working group memberships, representation on other council bodies and outside bodies will remain the same until then, as will these procedure rules, unless the return to normal life makes returning to a normal schedule of meetings possible. Other than when an important decision is required very quickly, I sincerely hope that it will be possible to sound out all members' views before any important decisions are taken, and when relevant, the local members' views. When an emergency decision has to be taken, then members will receive a full account of why and how that decision was taken at the next following council meeting after that decision. For some decisions, therefore, it may well be possible to offer members more input than they might normally get, and I hope that this would be the case. The decision to suspend motions at council and questions has been taken following the premise set out in the regulations that only required business should be conducted. At the discretion of the head of paid service, any question, deputation or petitions can be dealt with without having to refer them to council. Questions are heavy on officer input and there may simply not be the capacity to work up an answer before the appropriate meeting. But as you all know, I have already invited you, if you have any questions, to ask the appropriate executive member that question. You are welcome to copy in all members if you think it's an important question, but I'd ask you to think about this carefully before you do it, because some members may not want to be burdened by having a lot of all member emails flying around. But that option is open to you, so please use it. And that is a way of getting round this problem that we have at the moment of officers being very busy doing other things. Similarly, the rules of procedure do not preclude scrutiny meetings, and I want you all to understand that quite implicitly. But at the moment, there is no programme for future executive meetings, which would be the usual requirement to have a scrutiny meeting. As far as scrutiny goes, and it's likely but not impossible that any overview matters, it's unlikely, forgive me, it's unlikely that any overview matters will be urgent enough to warrant a meeting. But again, it is possible to have a meeting. Thank you for listening to me, and I'll now pass over to the chairman for any questions on the papers in front of you.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Members, do you have any questions? And if you do have questions, can you please type question in the Skype chat box and then they will be taken in turn. Okay. Thank you.
I can't hear her,
all
though.
The questions have been asked.
I can't hear Rose talking.
Pardon?
What's doing that?
Chairman, so could I just, before we go into questions, and I've got a question from Councillor Hodgson, can I just ask members, if they're not speaking, to mute their microphones if they can, please?
Sound.
So I think Councillor Reeve, I think we can hear you. Right, yeah, there you go, you've managed it. Thank you. Chairman, we've got a question from Councillor Hodgson, is the first question.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just really a question about how this fits in with our constitution, because I've looked at part 4 of the constitution and the council procedure rules, that in point 22.2 in suspension amendment of council procedure rules, any motion to add to, vary or revoke the rules of procedure of all bodies of the council or the council itself will, when proposed and seconded, stand adjourned without discussion to the next ordinary meeting of the council. Does this mean item 6, in other words, the item we're talking about now, will be adjourned without discussion or vote to next week's full council, or are we doing this today?
Can I ask, Chairman, is it okay if I ask
David
Fairbairn,
certainly, Steve, go ahead.
Monitoring Officer, to answer that question?
Yes.
David?
Thank you, Steve. Good afternoon, members. We have to effectively agree the procedure rules this afternoon to enable the rest of the business to be transacted, because without the rules being adopted, you couldn't proceed on the usual basis, because your existing procedure rules require all members to be present in one place. So the rules are being adopted this afternoon to enable the business that's on the agenda to be conducted. So there won't be any adjournment or to a further meeting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbairn. Okay, shall I go back to you, Steve?
We've no other questions at the moment. I know Councillor Hotwood is struggling to participate at the moment. She's not online properly. But I've no other questions at this point, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So We will then move on to
I've
the
got-
debate. I'll invite members who would like to take part in the debate. If they have any...
Chairman, can I move the recommendations, please?
Yes, you may do.
Excuse me, Chairman, I've just had a question
And
come in from
I
Councillor
will-
Brazil.
And I will second it.
So the motion has been formally moved and seconded.
Chairman, sorry, I didn't have time to get in properly because there is a very small amendment on the screen in front of you, and it's the underlined words "or the clerk to the meeting," which has been added in the first and second line. I believe this has been seconded by Councillor Baldry, but he can confirm that.
I second
Councillor
it.
Baldry?
Seconded.
Fine, thank you.
And I think there is a question from Councillor Brazil that's come in.
Correct.
Okay, correct?
Yeah, Councillor Brazil?
I don't have a list down the side of my screen, so I can't see who's asking to speak. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, hi Rose. I think if you click the bubble, it might come up with the questions.
Well, I haven't got a bubble either.
Bottom left hand. bottom left.
No, I haven't got that. All
Okay.
I've got
All right,
is
sorry.
item
Sorry.
6 and
No,
your-
my question was, and I don't know if it's the right place to do it, is that obviously there was an email that came from Judy in respect of decisions taken to do with fusion, and those were taken under emergency powers. I just wonder if I appreciate that, and I'm sure it was, it was what was required. Otherwise, fusion were going to go under, and it was required. But I just wondered if there was any way that we, is this how most decisions are going to be taken now? Putting aside all the whether we have committee meetings or not, and secondly, how do we know what kind of decisions like that have been taken?
Who would like to answer this question?
I can start, if that's all right, Chairman.
Thank you. That's fine, Judy. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's Judy Pearce speaking. Councillor Brazil, I can tell you that this decision had to be taken exceedingly quickly. I think we heard about it on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and the decision needed to be taken within 24 hours, because if we hadn't, there was a risk that fusion could have closed down that quickly. You will get a full account of how the decision was taken at the next council meeting, and in fact you have already received those papers, so it is there for you to look at.
Can I add, Chairman, to Councillor Pearce's
Yes, sure, go
response?
ahead.
Steve Molyneux. Further to that, Councillor Brazil, the decisions that were made in the first few days when this was, a lockdown scenario, we need to protect the public, and the government message was very clear. I don't anticipate that there will be many other decisions like that now, because we're actually becoming to what I would consider much more of a new normal. So I actually think that, as Councillor Pearce said, that was literally, we had 24 hours to make a decision. Otherwise, Fusion was saying we're going to go out of business. So it was a decision that was taken, and it's for a short period of time, 3 months, and that's been agreed with Fusion. But in terms of other decisions, I'm expecting now, as we move into this new normal, that actually there's much more of a consultative process that involves members as and when needed. There's a question from Councillor Austin.
Okay, thank you for that.
I've just got a question on this minor amendment that's being put forward. It says, on a motion being put to the vote, the mayor, chairman, or the clerk to the meeting will ask each member. Why are we putting that in place? Why is it not just the chairman that will ask each member, taking each in alphabetical order? Why are we amending it to include the clerk as well?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, I think so. Carry on.
It is normally the Democratic Services officer who reads out the names and has the alphabetical list in front of him and takes the tally, Councillor Austin. That's why we've asked for that to be added, just so that we act as normal rather than having to do something different. Is that all right?
Yeah, okay, thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
We have a comment. I don't think it's a question from Councillor Baldry. Councillor Baldry, we are supposedly in questions, or?
Sorry, Chairman, I'm just going to comment on the point made by Councillor Austin.
Right.
And as I seconded the amendment, I think the chairman has got enough to do concentrating on what she has got in front of her, working off many bits of paper and the screen. And that is why I agreed to second this amendment to make life easier for the chairman. And as Councillor Pearce has already said, it is normal for the clerk of the meeting to take down the votes whenever it is a recorded vote. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Baldry. You're absolutely right. I have got enough to be getting on with because I can't see people, and it's not easy to chair a meeting when you're not actually can see people who wants to speak and their faces. However, if anyone else has not got no further questions, I believe there was an amendment being presented by Councillor Birch. Is that correct?
I put a question. I've typed a question in, Chairman.
Oh, right.
It's just for Mr. Molyneux made, Councillor Pearce made reference to the fact that the details for Fusion, or what the decision that had to be taken by Fusion, are in the agenda for the 30th of April, which is next week. Could somebody just give me a pointer as to where in the agenda that comes? I'm just looking.
Sorry, Chair. Do you want me to take that point?
Sure, carry on, Darryl.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Smurden, it's actually, because it's a part 2 item, it's the very last item on that agenda. So it's after the reports of other bodies. It will be the final item in the executive session.
Okay, right. So, well, I'm actually looking at it on another computer. Right. Exclusion of public and press is down there, is it? Or...
It is under use of emergency powers, I think the title is.
It's not on the. So it's actually not on the agenda that's on our website then, because that's where I'm. Okay,
no,
that's all right.
As a part 2 item, it won't be on the open website.
Fine, thank you. I'll sort it out. Thank you.
Councillor Smurden, could we concentrate on the meeting today? We'll worry about next week's meeting when we finish this meeting. Thank you. Carry on. So
yes, Chairman.
Right. Thank you. We'll then carry on. If any more questions that wanted to be asked before we move on again. Steve, have you any more questions that?
No, I think we're fine to move to the amendment proposed by Councillor Birch.
Okay, so Councillor Birch, would you like to propose your amendment, please?
Yeah, I propose my amendment as on the screen.
And a seconder, please.
Councillor Mackay, it should be.
Yes, I second it.
Thank you very much. So there is one opportunity for you each to debate the amendment, and we will take it from there. So Councillor Birch, would you like to present your amendment, please?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Over the past year, this council has conducted its affairs in such a manner that has resulted in a more consensual approach than that of its predecessor. This approach has been carried through into a united approach in dealing with the current crisis. And as a result of this approach, I believe that many of our residents consider this council to be more effective than its predecessor. I fear that the respect for this council could be thrown out of the window in the event of its adopting the remote meeting procedure rules as set out in the agenda. This document has already attracted widespread criticism across the district as a result of its intention to eliminate the all-important democratic element of members' involvement in the decision-making process. The email I sent out to members on Tuesday identifies those 3 parts of the proposed rules that, in my opinion, offend the rules of democracy. And the 3 parts are: the first is set out at paragraph 3.1a, which means, if implemented, it will be left to the head of paid service to determine whether or not meetings take place. Now, in my opinion, and I know this is shared by many, this has got to be wrong. We all know how much officers enjoy coming to our meetings and being asked awkward questions. Now, such a proposal, in my opinion, equates to the head of the civil service deciding when Parliament should sit. This is clearly wrong, and I cannot believe that any member would support such a move. Secondly, paragraph 3.1b, dealing with overview and scrutiny. What is being proposed will effectively shut down overview and scrutiny, and with it, the scrutiny of the Council's proposed decisions and actions. In other words, this shutdown will effectively give the executive and officers free rein without any challenge by members. Again, this must be wrong. Again, I cannot believe that any member would support such a move. Then there's paragraph 3.3a, seeks to exclude questions or motions. As my note to members mentioned, there is nothing in the regulations that provides support for such a move, and I believe that such a move is ultra vires and flies in the face of the democratic process. And finally, there is no mention of any review within these this proposed procedure. In other words, these rules are proposed to be in place until May 2021, and surely this must be wrong. Surely there must be in place a review so that we as members can determine whether or not such procedure continues. Now, can I make it clear that my recommendation is not proposing an immediate return to regular meetings as set out in the Council's calendar. It recognises the current demands being put on officers, and as a result of this crisis, my amendment seeks to find a middle way, and that is why I'm proposing that it be referred to the political structure working group so that they can be tasked with coming up with a sensible compromise for our meeting next Thursday. So I would hope that members will agree my amendment as a sensible and democratic way forward, and I would request your support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. If we move on, Steve, can I call you in, please?
Yes, there's no questions at the moment or no comments for debate.
Thank you. Councillor Mackay, would you like to speak?
He does.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, obviously I'm supporting this motion, this amendment. Firstly, I want to preface my comments by saying that the officers of this council have really shown their mettle over the last 3 weeks or so. The council has managed to reconfigure itself and rise to the many challenges that has been thrown at it, not least from central government. And I imagine every member would want to applaud them for their dedication and hard work over the last few weeks. So what I'm about to say should not be construed in any way as a criticism of officers. But what is being proposed in section 3 of the Appendix A is, I believe, unacceptable, because it does effectively extinguish any glimmer of a democratic process. It is completely at odds with the intention of the legislation that the report cites, whose primary purpose is to facilitate the democratic process, not hinder it. The legislation came with an explanatory memorandum that, and it's clear from that, and it is quoted in paragraph 2.2 of the report that you've got there, that the proposed procedure rules satisfy the statement that it is there to facilitate the democratic process. And in paragraph 5.2. It says that it satisfies this, but I don't believe this is the case. and just stating that it doesn't make it so. Personally, I find it hugely disappointing that we're even having this discussion. In my view, it does little for the credibility of the council, and it would even contemplate proposals of this nature. The fact that West Devon Borough Council didn't question it doesn't do them any credit either, I don't think. Members may be familiar with the Centre for Public Scrutiny. It is an important institution that works with the LGA. I've been in touch with their Director of Research, and I want to read you his comments. The government has put in place regulations to allow for remote meetings for precisely the reason that council's business can continue. The Local Government Act is quite expansive when it comes to scrutiny powers and roles, and government has not suspended or given councils discretion over the duty to convene these meetings during this period. Doing so for a few weeks in the early stages of the operational response and while arrangements are being made to technically provide for remote meetings makes sense. But in the medium term, there is an obligation for democratic business to continue. Decision makers are accountable to all councillors and to the wider public for the decisions they make. The best way for this accountability to be evidenced is through formal public meetings. So that is the view of the Centre for Public Scrutiny. I question the need for these draconian measures. It is a shutdown of the democratic process. I appreciate what Councillor Pearce was saying earlier about access through the portfolio holders, but that is not a sufficient substitution for the proper democratic process, and I see no need for what is being proposed. In Appendix 3.3a of in Appendix A 3.3a in the proposal, it states, in keeping with the rationale for holding meetings only, that are required, agendas for any such meetings required to be held shall not include items, questions or motions. I don't understand the logic of this at all. Why would a meeting that is required not include items for questions or motions? I mean, the two are, it makes no sense to me. Meetings will be required, and when they're convened, there will be a need for questions and motions. I mean, that is the proper democratic process. And in Appendix, in 3.1b, it states about the ONS shall only be held where they are required by law. And I've consulted quite widely on this. And unlike full council, which has matters reserved to it, the same is not true of ONS. And hence, it appears to be a thinly disguised attempt to endorse. ONS is what renders an executive style council democratic, and that's what we've got. To say that the exec is not meeting so there is no need is beyond the pale. The exec should be meeting, plain and simple. The emergency powers that are being used are taken from Part 3A, Paragraph 7 of the Constitution, where it states, in an emergency, the head of service is empowered to carry out any function of the council. And that's all there is in the Constitution about this. But there is no definition of what an emergency is, and there is no national emergency insofar as one has not been declared under the Civil Contingencies Act, and neither has this council actually declared its own emergency. So it seems it's just been decided as an emergency by the acting CEO and the leader, which in the first few weeks everybody felt perfectly happy with. But what is unacceptable is these emergency powers to continue to be assumed without any attempts at a consultation with members, and even now we're not really being consulted. So, and also these procedure rules will be enforced until May 2021. There's no provision for these to be reviewed monthly. So, and my final point is that if you look to what other councils are doing, you'll see that many are now doing remote meetings, and they're allowing the full democratic process to take place, obviously with a restricted and more managed agenda, but nonetheless they're allowing these things to continue. And also they have, as part of their process, declared emergencies locally and delegated powers to their CEO under those declarations, and they are now subject to regular review, monthly or whatever. there's a whole list of these councils listed on the LGA site, and you just have to look at their what they're doing and their meeting agendas, and you can see that everybody else is managing to do this, or a lot of people are managing to do this. So I see no reason why this council can't do it. So on that basis, I would urge all members to support Councillor Birch's amendment. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you for that, Councillor Mackay. If we could move on, the motion has been, or the amendment has been proposed.
Councillor Rowe, I've got a list of people who would like to speak. Councillor Rowe, if that's okay.
On the amendment?
On the amendment. So the first one I've got on my list.
Would you like to proceed with the list then, please? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the first person I've got on my list is Councillor Austin.
Hello, yes. I think I will be voting against this amendment. I think we're living through really extraordinary times. This pandemic, in my opinion, is an emergency. It's certainly the most extraordinary sort of times I've lived through, and during my lifetime. I think the council's done very well given the circumstances so far. I think the council and the officers have functioned very well. If we approve this this amendment, then I think, as the leader was sort of suggesting earlier on, it would cause problems for the working of the officers and the council in the future. I think all councillors do believe in democracy. I think we wouldn't stand for local government if we didn't believe in democracy in the first place. But these are extraordinary, difficult times with the coronavirus. And I don't think what we want to do is tie the hands of either the officers or those people who are making decisions when they need to make rapid decisions potentially, and when it has actually been functioning quite well. I don't believe there is anything sinister going on here in terms of, facilitating democracy. I think as a group of councillors, we're quite capable of operating democratically. And I think what we're doing today in terms of this meeting, which is one of the first meetings that have been held like this in the country, go to demonstrate how well the council is functioning at the moment. So I would not be supporting this recommendation, the amendment to the recommendation, although I will be supporting the motion in its original form.
Thank you, Councillor Austin. The next speaker, please, Steve.
Apologies to Councillor Hodgson. I missed that she'd asked just before Councillor Austin. So Councillor Hodgson is next.
Thank you, Chairman. I will be supporting this amendment, as well. I recognise that we need to agree new ways of holding meetings during this CV outbreak and the lockdown that prevents face-to-face meetings, and the need for reduced meetings to enable emergency work to take place. I am concerned that the two parts of the protocol that will effectively shut down scrutiny and inputs from ward members could stop all meetings taking place potentially for the next 13 months. I'm concerned it is apparently all right to ignore the constitutional point I made earlier in the questions. I think we're setting a dangerous precedent to take it forward on that basis. The proposed new rules in the protocol are seeking an agreement for us not to be able to ask questions, scrutinise decisions or put forward proposals at our own full council meetings. And furthermore, the decision to hold full council meetings is being delegated such that we could be part of a council that has handed effectively all its decision making over to a very small number of senior officers and councillors. And since our participation is generally the only way we can truly represent our communities, we will be effectively disempowering the majority of district councillors. Without any prior consultation or discussion with ward members on this protocol, we district councillors are being asked to approve a set of rules that will prevent us from properly being able to represent our residents, businesses and communities. And at a critical time like this, we all need to be able to pool our resources, propose and discuss good ideas and work together as a team. The proposals in the new government regulations are not asking us to stop meetings or scrutiny. Indeed, other local authorities, including Devon County Council, are not attempting to shut down scrutiny or avoid holding regular meetings. Parliament has reopened this week and much has been made in the news of the return to scrutiny and PM question time. The virtual meetings that I have experienced at Devon County Council, as well as town and parish council meetings in the last couple of weeks, have worked very well. And while some arrangements have been made to enable clerks and officers to take some delegated urgent decisions as part of an emergency response, This is already in our constitution, and there has not been any proposal at those other meetings to refuse questions and motions of any of their full council meetings or to stop further meetings without notice. I've consulted parish and town councillors that I serve on this proposal, and all have been very surprised and pretty shocked at these proposals, which they feel will disempower them too. We've all received a considered letter from South Ham Society in response to these proposals, and they add their concerns. Our constitution in point 1.2 says the purpose of our constitution is to ensure the good governance of the council in the public interest by describing the structures and operating systems by means of which the council will secure that it can deliver its services efficiently and effectively. B, providing the means of internal scrutiny and oversight of the delivery of council policies and services. And C, improving transparency and delivery of services being accountable to the local community. I'm very concerned that this potential shutdown of democracy and the prevention of our inputs to district council meetings and decisions during this crisis, and consider an imposition on the undermining of our elected representative duties. I accept that we need to reduce the regular schedule of meetings, in particular the committee meetings and working groups, but I do not accept that we reduce our full council meetings, agendas and scrutiny as proposed. So many of us are actively doing a lot of good work in the community and finding constraints that might need to be challenged as this crisis continues, and perhaps be able to consider new ideas to assist our communities. Why would there be any desire to remove the questioning of decisions or proposals that could be beneficial unless others don't think it would be supported? I see no evidence for this. This is an important time for scrutiny and good decision making for all of us at South Hams District Council, and it's important we work as a team. I don't think the residents who have elected us would thank us for handing over ours or their power. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Mr. Molyneux, do you have many more speakers who wish to speak on this matter? Because
at the moment I've got 6. So Councillor Sweet is next.
Can I ask, please, don't ask people, please do not repeat what's already been said. I think that's very important. People have already started to repeat, members, what's previously been said. So keep it short and snappy. And if it's already been said, then please don't say it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to repeat what you've just said, because I was just going to try and make sure I didn't repeat anything that Councillor Hodgson had said. And thank you. I'm assuming Darryl gave my apologies earlier. Sorry, I wasn't able to join the meeting bang on 2 o'clock. Okay, I'm just going to add that for me, I keep thinking about where we all were a year ago when we were sort of finishing our, election campaigns, and how none of us could have foreseen where we'd be now. And I'm sort of looking into the future of where we're going to be in a year's time. And I know that as a member of this council, which I feel really proud to be involved with, to be part of, over the last year, I want to continue being as involved as I can, both humanly possible and as far as IT will allow us. I think we've got an amazingly dedicated and hard-working team of officers. We're a group of really passionate, hard-working members. I know I'm dedicating hours and hours of my time to support sort of residents and business owners in my ward. And I'll quote from a letter that we had from the South Ham Society. I don't think that there's a legitimate rationale for the curtailment of our rights to be able to question, to be able to scrutinise. I fully understand that things need to be done differently at this time, which is why I'll draw attention to part 2 of Councillor Birch's recommendation, which is actually the Political Structures Working Group meet prior to next week's full council meeting, to work through this and actually put together a package of how we can successfully hold meetings and how we can ask questions within the realms of the situation we're in now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sweet.
Chairman, it's Councillor Brazil next.
Okay, Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Rose. Yes, first of all, I'd just like to echo John's opening comments about the consensual nature of the business of this council, and I think that's absolutely right and has been a massive improvement. And taking on the board that kind of way forward, I'd like to think that although we've got 2 what people may see opposing an motion and an amendment which are totally opposed, actually I think they're probably quite close together, and I'm sure that we can find common ground here. I think the concern that very many members have is that the decision to hold whether to or not hold meetings, or whether decisions should be decided by a meeting or a committee meeting rather than just through emergency powers, that decision seems to be just in the hands of the chief executive or the acting chief executive in consultation with the leader of the council. I would have thought if we could just expand that to maybe the leader of the opposition and maybe another executive member, I'm sure that would allay many of the fears that members have, because I think everything else follows on from that, is that if those group of people, rather than just the leader and the chief exec, take a decision, that would, everything else would fall into place. So I hope that we don't see this as an either or, but actually a bit of both, and that we can find a solution, because I do worry that for whatever reasons that the public seem to have got the impression that this is a sort of power grab by officers and senior members. I'm sure it's not, and I'm sure it's not meant to be like that, but I think perception is everything, and we should try and allay those fears by just tweaking these powers slightly, so that we can have have consensus within the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil.
Right, Chairman, it's Councillor O'Callaghan next.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Can I raise a point of order, please, Chairman, before we move on to the next
sure.
person?
Yes, Councillor Austin.
Yeah, normally, in order to move for the vote on an amendment, when we have it in the past, what we do is we have 5 people stand up and we move to take the vote at that point. What is the protocol if we want to move to the vote on this amendment now?
On that one, Chair?
Yes, please, Darryl.
Ordinarily, Councillor Austin's right. When 5 members stand and ask for a recorded vote, we go down alphabetically the list, and the vote breakdown is shown in the published minutes. What the procedures are proposing now is that I still go down the list and read out members alphabetically for or against, but actually, unless it's specifically requested, the vote breakdown won't be shown in the minutes. So it'll be the same process without the individual vote breakdown being shown in the minutes.
Thank you for that explanation, Councillor
So
Austin.
I think it's got the wrong point there.
What action would I take if I want to move to take the vote now? I can't stand up in the chamber because I don't know if 5 people can stand up. So what action would I take now if I want us to vote on the amendment?
If you want a vote on, in effect, taking the vote now, you need to propose in second. We need to have a vote on voting now before we even went into the matter itself. So, I mean, in terms of standing up, that is for recorded votes. If you want to propose a motion that we move to the vote on the amendment now, that will need a seconder and a separate vote again.
Chairman,
can I propose that?
Point of order.
Can I propose that motion then?
No, you can't. No, you can't, Chairman. Under the Constitution, if you have already spoken in the debate, you may not move that vote.
Very good. I'm getting lost now. I'm not quite sure of the exact constitutional point on that matter. I'm sure if Councillor Pennington was with us, he would have been able to tell us. Mr. Molyneux, are you able to advise us as to where we are, please?
I would defer to Mr. White or Mr. Fairbairn.
Yeah, I was.
They know the
Yes,
answer
yeah.
to that question.
I would suggest,
Okay.
Chairman, I think you were
Can
going
we
to...
move, Chairman? Sorry. Can we move on, I think, and you've got about 3 more speakers?
Yes, it was Councillor O'Callaghan was about to speak, and then we've got Councillor Rose and Councillor Pearce.
Right, okay, so if we could have, if Councillor O'Callaghan and then Councillor Rose can speak briefly, and then I will ask Councillor Pearce to be the final speaker on this matter, please. So 2 more swiftly, and then Councillor Pearce. Thank you.
Is it me on?
It is.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Don't say anything that somebody's already said. Thank you.
The trouble is when you put your name forward, you don't know what people are going to say, do you? But
Well, if they've already said it, you just say, I don't need to speak because it's already been said.
well, I would like to speak.
Carry on.
Lance has had quite a bit of a chance to speak, so I'd like to continuing that tradition. And Councillor Austin did say that this was an emergency, and that's true. But first casualty of an emergency shouldn't be democracy or transparency, which is more important than ever. And I'm concerned that there hasn't been consultation with members really on this proposal to not really have much consultation with members. It has all been said already, but specifically 3.3b talks about the public as well as lack of input from councillors. So I'd just like to refer to that, where the rules provide for questions from members of the public who have elected us. Members of the public, deputations and petitions to be asked. The head of paid service may deal with any such questions, deputations and petitions without referring them to a meeting of the council. So it's not just councillors who may not be able to give all the input they would like under these proposals, it's also the public, and we do work for the public, and that's something I just wanted to point out. So I will be supporting Councillor Birch's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Rose, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Is that working?
Yes.
Great.
Loud and clear.
I'll try to be very brief. I became a councillor because I really care about, what's going on and on many different levels, and because I wanted to be able to represent, maybe the younger generations and people who don't normally have representation in these kind of council meetings because of various different reasons. And I have been really pleasantly surprised in this process of how much good work and good intention is being put on in all different directions. I feel really quite shocked about this particular move to take away their powers to ask questions and to make proposals, because I see that this isn't in any way attack on the people who would have the decision to make those powers, because I really trust that we're all doing our best, and this isn't any kind of conspiracy power grab idea. It's just really about precedent, and it's really about what is the point of having a council. The point of having a council is that when we are entering difficult decision making territory, it isn't just going down to one person, because if it's just one person or a few people making that decision, it can be from one limited point of view. The whole point of having a political variety is that we get different points of view on important decisions, and at a time of emergency those decisions are even more important than ever. And I can't really believe that this council thinks it would be appropriate to suspend councillors from having their say, which is the whole point of us having a council and not being in a dictatorship. So I certainly will be recommending this recommendation, and I know I shouldn't say things that have already been said before, but I also just want to take this opportunity to say such a massive thank you and round of applause for all of the work being done behind the scenes by all the officers and the senior leadership team and executives and everyone who have been doing such a fantastic job. This is in no way an attack on you. It's just saying that we've got a council for a reason, and we shouldn't be throwing that out with the bathwater. Thank you very much.
Chairman, I missed off Councillor Thomas. My apologies. He did ask to speak, and I got him confused with my other Dan. So if you will allow
Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thomas is the last speaker on your list, and then Councillor Pearce. Is that right?
Correct.
Councillor Thomas, would you like to make any comments which you would like to, please?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was hoping to ask a question. If you're going to call the leader, it's specifically for the leader to address, if possible.
If you'd like to put your question, then ask the question. The leader will answer it when she speaks.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. So my specific question is, I was hoping the leader could explain the rationale and the thinking process specifically behind item 3.3 and the business that no questions or motions on notice from councillors. I fully appreciate that officers are exceedingly busy, but if we are going to have meetings, I was wondering what the rationale was. If a meeting does take place, it would seem proper that we could ask questions at that point, because if we're going to have a meeting as we are today, there are a number of officers present anyway, and it follows that therefore they would be able to answer questions and explain decisions that we could then fully support in knowing how they'd got about making that particular decision. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Pearce, I will call on you next, please, and you can answer Councillor Thomas's question at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start by saying that I don't know how many of you have actually read the regulations that against which these rules of procedure were written. And I'd like to say this feels very much like a personal attack on me. I did not write these rules of procedure. They were written by one of the council's lawyers. They've been put in front of the monitoring officer and they've gone through lots of tests before they've come to you. And I do find it extraordinary that this can be accepted by West Devon Council without any question, and yet somehow it seems to be taking on a completely different life at South Hams, as evidenced by moving these amendments. However, I'm not going to speak in detail on the matter here, save to say one or two remarks that I'd like to make. Now, on the question of 3.1a, the head of paid service allowing meetings in consultation with the leader, I think Councillor Brazil has made quite a sensible suggestion there. And I would be quite happy for that to include the executive, which would include the leader of the opposition, but in any case, the leader of the opposition. But I'm not going to propose that now because this is not the place. We'll get this amendment out of the way and then maybe we can do that next. Now, the next thing is that this is not a power grab at all. These procedure rules have been written closely against the regulations, and the aim is to facilitate the work that we're doing at the moment. We are not trying to take democracy away, and of course the situation will be kept under continuous review. And I think the wording allows for that, because when there is something that needs scrutinising, there will be a scrutiny meeting. And when we need to have an executive meeting, we will have an executive meeting. But at the moment, all normal business is suspended. Now, this is as much hugely disappointing for the executive and the party in power as it is for the opposition, because we have a programme that we want to progress and move through. And at the moment, everything is absolutely stationary. But actually, the vulnerable in our communities, the people who have to be shielded, and the businesses that are really struggling are what we have got to concentrate on at the moment. And I know that you are making fantastic efforts, and I commend you all for what you are doing in the community. But at the moment, your focus needs to be on the community and not playing politics in the council chamber. Now, you can all question as much as you like, and I'll come around to answering Councillor Thomas's question now, because in fact, Councillor Thomas, you are asking a question at the moment and you are getting an answer. Now, 3.3, I think I have just answered. When there is time and we can run such meetings properly and get back on the normal programme, we will do so as soon as possible. But I think that's unlikely that it's going to be any time soon. Now, as things start letting up, we will start having meetings. They may not be as regular, and they may not be as often, and they may not always be programmed. But given that most of us, given some notice, can make a meeting anyway, I don't think that that is going to make a lot of difference. Now, I hope that that goes some way to answering that question. Let's have a look. Sorry, I'm just consulting my notes here. Whether questions and motions are to be permitted is entirely a matter of standing orders, and the view can be taken that given the purpose of holding a meeting is to focus upon the business that is required to be done, because that's what the regulations say, questions and motions that are unrelated to such business are a distraction from the task in hand and resource hungry. And I think it is the resource hungry bit that we have to listen to, because we have one set of officers, remember, running two councils, and we are not the only demand on those officers. They have lots and lots of other demands on them at the moment. I think that's all I need to say, but I will not be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. So, Mr Molyneux.
Go to the vote?
Yes,
Yeah,
shall we
you can
therefore
go to the
move
vote, Chairman. So,
hand you over to Darrell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So what I'll do, members, I'll go down the list of attendees alphabetically. If for any reason the members dropped out and I don't hear anything, I'll at the end of after I've read Councillor Thomas's name, I'll go back to any members that have momentarily dropped out. So members, of course, this is voting on the amendment in alphabetical order. Councillor Abbott.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry.
For the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Bastone. Councillor Bastone. Against. Thank you. Councillor Birch.
I'm for, but can I just say I have sent a note saying, can we have a recorded vote, please? I'm sure I can. I realise I need the support of 5 members. I think there's already 1, 2, 3.
It's already started.
No, I'm sorry. No, we can't.
I sent the note before you went to the vote, so I will ask
too
that
late.
this be
No.
a recorded vote. I've got this. There's 5 people supporting a recorded vote. Can we have this, please?
No, can we move on? We've started to take the vote, Mr Molyneux. Darrell, Mr White has started to
we
take
did start the vote before Councillor
Yes.
Birch asked for it to be recorded.
Okay, Councillor Brazil.
For.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Chown.
Against.
Councillor Foss.
Against.
Councillor Hawkins.
Against.
Councillor Hodgson.
For.
Councillor Holway.
Against.
Councillor Hopwood. Councillor Jackson.
For.
Councillor Long.
For.
Councillor May.
Against.
Councillor McKay.
For.
Councillor O'Callaghan.
For.
Councillor Panel.
For.
Councillor Pearce.
For. Okay, again. Sorry. Again.
Judy, come on.
Again. It always
Councillor
happens.
Pringle.
Against.
Councillor Reeve.
Against.
Councillor Rose.
Against.
For. Oh.
Whoa.
Councillor Rowe.
Against.
Councillor Smurden.
Against.
Councillor Spencer.
Against.
Councillor Sweet.
For.
Councillor Taylor.
Against.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
Thank you, members. That amendment is with 13 votes in favour and 16 votes against, lost. Thank you, members.
Chairman, may I ask a technical question, please?
Carry on.
I can't put this on chat because I've been suspended from chat since 1434. So I cannot comment or ask to speak or make any other addition.
Sorry, I don't understand.
I can't make a comment on the chat written system.
Oh, right, okay.
If someone could just maybe call me at home and let me know if there's what I can do because
But you have voted,
it means I
haven't you?
cannot ask to speak.
Did you
I
vote?
have. I can speak and vote. Yeah, I have voted. Thank you. But
That's
it means I
fine,
can't
okay.
put my name down.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there for now. Okay, thanks, Councillor Panel. Can we then move on to the substantive motion then, please?
Chairman, Councillor Pearce, I think, would like to propose another amendment.
Fine.
Before Councillor Pearce starts, could I just say a few words, Chairman? I know
Yes, carry on.
a member.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Molyneux.
I just wanted to thank all members for their support for officers that many people articulated in the previous part of the debate. It's really appreciated, and I and the rest of SLT are extremely proud about the amount of effort that officers are putting in and how quick we've reacted. I think that as an organisation, the process that we've gone through has enabled pretty much every officer to adapt and work from home, and we've started to use sort of the way we work to it's been described as using the case management model in anger in terms of to react to the different needs that we currently find ourselves in. At the same time, understanding what members have said about the debate, I just want to reassure members, I don't intend to try and be a dictator of any description whatsoever. And as Councillor Pearce said, I absolutely want to get back to normal as quickly as we possibly can in terms of what new normal is. There's nothing I'd welcome more than a couple of hours being scrutinised by Councillor Birch, because in terms of the workload that we've currently got, that would actually be a welcome sort of back to usual sort of thing. So I just want to reassure members that there is no intention for this to be to avoid decision making, to avoid scrutiny, and all the officers would love to get back to that scenario. So that was all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Mr. Molyneux. I'm sure that we, as members of the council, do absolutely appreciate absolutely everything that you and all the staff have done during the last few weeks. It's been very difficult. We've been working through uncharted waters, and we don't actually know what's going to be thrown at us next. But thank you for that. I will hand you back to Councillor Pearce, I believe.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, in the spirit of collaboration and the consensual approach, which Councillor Brazil referred to, on which I think he made a very good point. He said that he thought it would take away the impression that there was a power grab or any sort of a dictatorship coming up if the executive and the leader of the opposition were to be included in any decision to hold a meeting with the chief executive and head of paid service. Now, I quite understand that could slow down the decision to have a meeting, but in the circumstances, I would be prepared to forego that, and I therefore propose in these rules of procedure that should be the case. Now, I know this is mentioned in paragraph 3.1, but I haven't yet had a time to scan through the whole document to see if it appears anywhere else. But if it does, I would be happy for that to be inserted anywhere in the document, where at the moment it just says, in the opinion of head of paid service or deputy in his/her absence, in consultation with the leader. Now, wherever it says that, if it says leader and the executive, including the leader of the opposition, then I'd be quite happy with that. And I propose that as an amendment.
Councillor Bastone seconds that.
Thank you. It's been proposed and seconded, so we will have that inserted in the correct place. We take the vote. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. I mean, obviously we're in debate at the moment on the substantive motion, but as you'll see on the screen, there's in effect one subject to. That will effectively be a subject to number 2, whereby it replaces the word in consultation with the leader with in consultation with the members of the executive. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Do we have any further debate? Does anyone wish to debate them further?
Chairman, Councillor Birch would like to speak, and then Councillor Hodgson.
And then we can move to the vote.
Screen is that amendment on, because I've still got the recommendation on my screen. So.
Can I
haven't put it on the screen, members. I mean, do you want me to add it to? I mean, it's entirely your call.
Helpful, thank you.
Are you waiting for me to say something?
Can I speak, please?
Can we have Councillor Birch? Yes, Councillor Birch, thank you.
So this is a procedural more than the fact is what is being proposed at 3.1 and 3.3 are amendments to are changes to the constitution of this council, and the fact is that what is being proposed does not comply with part 2 of article 13.3 of the constitution. Therefore it is of no effect. That is, those listed at 3.1 and 3.3, because it doesn't, the way that the procedure has not followed the changes to the constitution, part 2 article 13.3. Thank you.
Thank you. I think Mr. Molyneux, is it Councillor Hodgson or?
It's Councillor Hodgson. Could we have, just before Councillor Hodgson, could I just ask either Mrs. Bowen or Mr. Fairbairn to comment on what Councillor Birch has said?
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. Thank you.
Chairman, if I may, it's Dave Fairbairn. In terms of the process, of course, these are emergency regulations. You're responding to those emergency regulations, and you can amend, of course, the Constitution. You are the council, so you can change the Constitution at any time, should you so wish, because you are the whole body, and it's therefore not in contravention of the Constitution. If proposals were being changed unilaterally or in normal circumstances, then yes, there would be that process to be gone through. But on this occasion, because of the regulations, because of the circumstances, we are finding ourselves in a position of having to agree these rules to allow this meeting and future meetings to proceed. So we could not have gone through the process that's set out in the Constitution. Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman, can I just endorse as the Council's monitoring officer that is what we are doing is a perfectly legitimate and lawful process to amend these rules in accordance with the government legislation.
No, that's not correct, because 13.3 says there can be only changes to the Constitution when it is a proposal by the monitoring officer. This is not a recommendation from a committee, which is not a report of the political structures working group, which is not, or a motion on notice submitted by members in accordance with the council procedure rule 10. It is not.
Hang on, can we have one at a time, please? Thank you. Mrs. Bowen?
Chairman, I have delegated this particular report and to bring this recommendation to the council to the Deputy Monitoring Officer, and I can evidence that if necessary, which I am perfectly entitled to do as on leave at the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We have one last speaker, I believe, which was...
Well, we've got Councillor Hodgson is next. Yeah, there are a few more speakers now.
Well, can we wind this up fairly shortly, I think, please?
Right, thank you. I'm not going to speak very long. I just wanted to say that I will not support this amendment because I think it's actually not going far enough. I don't think it satisfies the concerns that I've raised and other people have already raised, and indeed the public have raised as well. I don't think it does the trick at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
So two speakers, Councillor Brazil, and then finally Councillor Thomas. Councillor
Brazil, please.
Thank you, Rose. Yes, and thank you to the leader for inserting that amendment. Whereas I appreciate for Jackie that it doesn't go far enough, and I sort of be inclined to agree with her. I do think that what it does show is that the leader and the council are prepared to compromise to a certain extent, and I, for one, will now be supporting the full motion mainly for the sake of solidarity and the fact that we're all in this together, and I think there is a much larger voice that will decide about the meetings, and I think that was the main problem that we had. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brazil. Thank you for what you've said. The next speaker is Councillor Thomas, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I echo entirely what Councillor Brazil's just said. I would add that I do hope the leader does not see it as a personal attack. I can speak for myself, and I would imagine for members of my political party, in telling her that it absolutely wasn't aimed as a personal attack. I think she does an excellent job leading this council, and I'm grateful that once again she has shown a sense of a conciliatory nature in coming towards something that I now feel that I will be able to support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm not quite sure whether Councillor Baldry wishes to speak or not.
Councillor Baldry, did you wish to have anything you want to add?
No, I don't. I've said me too, but it got overtaken by other messages. I am supporting what Councillors Thomas and Priscilla are saying. I thank the leader for what she has done, and I will be voting for the motion as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry. So now I think I move back to Councillor
There's no more questions, Councillor Rowe, so that's it.
So
No more
Councillor
debate.
Pearce, shall we bring Councillor Pearce in?
Yep.
Councillor Pearce,
Chairman, I'm
please.
happy to move to the vote.
Thank you. So we're, Darryl, then we need to take the vote, please. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So
Sorry,
just to
Chairman, sorry, could we have a recorded vote, please?
Well, okay.
Will it be a recorded vote anyway, or by virtue of the fact, or do I have to ask for a recorded vote?
you do need to ask for it. Yes, it is a recorded vote, but in terms of getting it in the published minutes, you do need to request it before the vote starts, Councillor Hopwood. So if you've got 5 members in favour, it will be recorded and shown in the minutes.
Thank you. I would like to request a recorded vote that would be put in the minutes, please. Do I have the support of 5 members?
So I've got
Yes,
Councillor Brown.
I would second it. I would second it.
Yes.
Councillor Austin.
Yes, we've got the support there. There's plenty of members. Councillor Brown, Councillor Austin, Councillor May, Councillor Harkins, Councillor Pearce, Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got the message.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. So, for absolute clarity, the motion as per on the screens, albeit there are 2 additions to it, because they've been accepted by the proposer and seconder of the initial motion, this is now the substantive motion, so we are voting on what is on the screens as a job lot. So, members, in alphabetical order, Councillor Abbott?
Against.
Councillor Austin?
In favour.
Councillor Baldry? Councillor Baldry? I'll come back to Councillor Baldry. Councillor Bastow?
I am here. I am voting.
Sorry, Councillor Baldry, can you repeat that?
I am voting for.
Thank you. Councillor Bastow?
For.
Councillor Birch?
Against.
Councillor Brazil?
For.
Councillor Brown?
For.
Councillor Chown?
For.
Councillor Foss?
For.
Councillor Hawkins?
For.
Councillor Hodgson?
Against.
Councillor Holway?
For.
Councillor Hopwood?
For.
Councillor Jackson? Councillor Jackson?
Against.
Oh, against. Thank you. Councillor Long?
For.
Councillor May?
For.
Thank you. Councillor McKay?
Against.
Councillor O'Callaghan?
Against.
Councillor Panel?
So I've only just come back into the meeting. I can't vote because I don't know what's being proposed. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll put you down as abstention. Thanks, Councillor Panel. Councillor Pearce? Councillor Pearce?
We lost her.
Apologies. For.
Well, thank you. Councillor Pringle?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Reeve?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Rose?
For. Oh, sorry. You said Rose,
against.
not no.
Sorry, was that against, Councillor Rose?
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe?
For.
Councillor Smurden? Councillor Smurden?
Sorry, I was muted. For. Sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer?
For.
Thank you. Councillor Sweet?
For.
Councillor Taylor?
For.
And Councillor Thomas?
For.
Thank you. Thank you, members. That is therefore 21 members in favour with 7 against and 1 abstention, and that substantive motion is therefore declared carried. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. White. So, motion's been carried. Or the item number 5 has been carried. Thank you. With the amendment as was on the screen. Thank you, the recommendation. We move on now to item 7, the appointment of the Chief Executive. And I believe that Councillor Pearce is going to lead on this one. Councillor Pearce, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Are we all getting a bit faint? Because I can't hear quite a few people very well.
Can you hear me all right, everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah?
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
First of all, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce this item. And this is the main reason, believe it or not, why we're here this afternoon, but we had to go through the last item to get to this one. I am very sorry, members, that in the circumstances, many of you were prevented from meeting the shortlist candidates. It had all been set up, and I have to say at my instigation, because this doesn't normally happen when a chief executive is appointed, and I was very keen that you should have been able to meet all the candidates. But as it was our baptism by fire with Skype meetings, because we had to interview 2 of them remotely in the end. And it was not easy, but we did have a very strong short list. We had a long list with some good candidates and some not so good candidates. But from those, we managed to get 4 really good candidates to come forward for the shortlist interview. And it's therefore all the more pleasing that the panel, which did a sterling job, and I'll return to that in just a second, unanimously selected Andy Bates to be our next Chief Executive and Head of Paid Service, as per the recommendations on this paper. I would like to thank the other members of the panel, and for South Hams it was Councillor Baldry and Councillor Bastone, along with the leader of West Devon, the leader of the opposition at West Devon, and another member, because it was quite hard work. We had a lot of reading to do and a lot of quite long meetings to sit through. And I'd like to thank the officers who ran the whole process as well, because it was interesting to say the least, but quite hard work. And it was good doing something together with West Devon that came out with such a good result. Do I have anything else to say? Sorry, I'm just checking my notes because I've been talking off the top of my head until now. Yes, I think I must also thank Steve Molyneux, first of all, for applying for the job, and secondly, for being such a good interim chief executive and head of paid service. I'm very pleased that this item recommends that he should officially be appointed as that until Andy Bates is able to join us, though he has been doing the work ever since the day that Sophie Hosking left us. And I think we owe a great debt to her too. And I know I said it to her at the last council meeting, but I will reiterate that I think she has done a wonderful job in bringing this council around and getting it working in the way it has been working, which set it up to enable it to be able to work how it's been working since the emergency started. And I think we have really shown in many ways that we are way ahead of other councils. And I guess, though I don't know, that's why Andy Bates applied for the job, because he knows how all the councils in the Southwest work. But I'm not sure whether he's present at the moment, but if he is, we look forward to welcoming him full-time amongst us as soon as possible, I hope, as long as you vote for the recommendations. But I'll put off proposing them until we have any questions first, please.
Thank you for that introduction, Councillor Pearce. Does anyone have any questions or would like to say anything at this point in time, please?
Well, first of all, can I just say, Chairman, thank you to the leader there for saying nice words about me. And I can assure the other members that having gone through that process, it was really, really thorough. So I would just echo that. But the first person who'd like to speak is Councillor Baldry.
Councillor Baldry.
Thank you, Chairman, very much. I just Councillor Pearce has, of course, formally moved the motion. I want to formally second the motion. I don't want to add a great deal to what she had to say, except to say in particular, I was very proud and pleased to be invited to be part of this appointment process. And I was also very impressed with the number of applicants we had, some of them very high quality, and that the final 4 on the short list were all possible people to do the chief executive of these authorities a job. They were all qualified, but in this particular case, and based on the evidence before us, I am convinced that Andy Bates will make an excellent chief executive, and I'm very pleased to support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry. I'm not sure that Councillor Pearce, did you move the recommendation?
I'm not sure I did, but I'm happy to now. I thought we were going for questions before I moved it, but I'm more than happy to move it, and then you can have questions as well if anybody wants to ask any.
Fine. So
As it's now moved, I shall now second it.
fine. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Anyone else on the list to speak, please, Mr. Molyneux?
Councillor Brown.
Councillor
Thank
Brown.
you, Chairman. Yes, I'm more than happy to support this appointment, but I would just like to place on record my thanks to Steve in his capacity as acting chief executive in these extraordinary and unprecedented times of directing a council at the moment. He and his officers have done an absolutely sterling job. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who wishes to pass comment at this point in time?
We do. We've got Councillor Sweet has got a question.
Okay, Councillor Sweet.
Chairman.
Thank you. Steve, I'd also like to say, how it was really amazing to see you up there working really hard in those, sorry, my dog's barking because my daughter's just come home from work. In those first few days before the lockdown, seeing your car up there and seeing you kind of like leap into action was really amazing, and thank you. This is a question. I just was wondering why the appointment hadn't been made kind of while Sophie was still there, just out of interest really, why it's taken this long in the process, why we hadn't sort of interviewed sort of 2 months ago.
Thank you. Perhaps the leader?
Yes, I can answer that question. Councillor Sweet, this is a very long process, and Mrs. Hosking handed in her notice just before Christmas. Now, you all know, as I know, that nothing happens between just before Christmas, so about the 14th of December, until everybody gets back to work in the first week in January. She was then on holiday, and so Steve Molyneux was standing in and busy there. But we did start the process immediately. We had to, first of all, select a recruitment consultant, so that took a couple of weeks. Then we had to advertise, and in fairness, if you want to get a good field, you have to advertise for a good few weeks to know that everybody has managed to see it and fill in the application form. Then you have to sort out the long list. Then the recruitment agency has to interview all those people to melt it down to a short list for you. And then you have to interview the shortlist. Then you have to wait, having offered the job to the person to make sure they're going to take it. And then we got caught by the lockdown, which actually I think if we had programmed the interviews so much as 24 hours later, they would not have happened and we still wouldn't have appointed anybody. But that's how long it takes. And I'm sorry, it's not a quick process.
Thank you. It really wasn't a criticism. It was just, it's just something that I've thought of a couple of times. So thank you for that. Thanks, Councillor Pearce.
Chairman, we've got Councillor Hodgson would like to speak.
Oh, come on, Chairman. What's going on and on.
I don't know who's moaning in the background. Anyway, I just wanted to say two things. One is that I'd also...
Hodgson, David May.
I'd just like to say that I'm appreciating as well Steve Molyneux's role, and who would have expected what he's had to deal with in the last, since he actually suddenly became, acting chief executive. And I think, again, he's done an excellent job. And, as leader of the Green Group, I would just like to thank him and his officers profoundly for that. And I suppose I'd just like to understand when the new appointee is going to take over the role. That would be interesting to know.
Thank you. If you're going to ask the question.
Can I just also say the final point is just very briefly. I'd just like to put on record, I do have concerns about anybody in the local authority being paid 120,000 a year. I raise it every year, and I'm just reiterating that.
Hang on,
thank you.
That might go into exempt information. Okay, thank you. So we don't wish to debate that unless we go into exempt information. So if you are the last speaker, Mr. Molyneux, anyone else wishes to speak? Because if not, we'll move to the vote, please.
No, that's it.
So can we move to the vote, please, Mr. White? Darryl?
Thank you, Chairman. So once again, in alphabetical order, members, on the motion as per the screens, Councillor Abbott.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Austin.
4.
Thank you, Councillor Baldry.
4.
Councillor Bastone.
4.
Councillor Birch.
4.
Councillor Brazil.
4.
Councillor Brown.
4.
Councillor Chow.
4.
Councillor Foss.
4.
Councillor Hawkins.
4.
Councillor Hodgson.
4.
Councillor Holway.
4.
Councillor Hopwood.
4.
Councillor Jackson.
4.
Councillor Long.
4.
Councillor May.
4.
Councillor McKay.
4.
Councillor O'Callaghan.
4.
Councillor Panel. Councillor Panel. I'll come back to Councillor Panel. Councillor Pearce.
4.
Councillor Pringle.
4.
Councillor Reeve.
4.
Councillor Rose.
4.
Councillor Rowe.
4.
Councillor Smurden.
4.
Councillor Spencer.
4.
Councillor Sweet.
4.
Councillor Taylor.
4.
And Councillor Thomas.
4.
Just checking, is Councillor Panel on the line?
I've just come back on. Is this for the appointment of the chief executive?
It is Councillor Panel, yes. I'm taking the vote now.
I'll vote for then, thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, that recommendation is therefore declared carried by unanimous vote. Thank you, members.
Chairman, can I just ask something, please?
Make it snappy, please.
I will, absolutely. Seeing as those of a lot of members won't know who the gentleman is who has been who we've just appointed, and seeing as it appears to be the season for making short videos, could I please request that our new chief executive makes a short video and introduces himself online to us, please?
Well, that sounds like a good idea, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Sure,
Chairman.
that could be requested via the leader.
Chairman, could I just ask something, mention something too, please, before we move on? Because I think the question was asked at the end and I didn't have a chance to answer it. When would Andy Bates be starting? Andy Bates is the LGA representative for the South West, and I have to say that we are getting a lot more of his time than many other councils in the South West at the moment. He's in regular contact with Steve Molyneux, he's in regular contact with me and the leader of West Devon, and he has been extremely good at putting our case forward, our particular cases for our two councils forward at the LGA in London. He will be joining us as soon as he can, because the LGA is aware now that he's been offered this post. They're very happy for him to take it up, and it will just be by negotiation. But I think we'll see a sort of gradual move from the LGA to here, so that at the moment he's probably only spending 20% of his time with us, and it'll just gradually, the dial will go up until it's 100%. But I can't give you a precise date at the moment.
Thank you. So, Councillor Pearce, is it possible perhaps we could ask him if he could just give us an introduction to himself in a short video?
A short video, I'm sure we can, unless he's online at the moment, but I don't think he is he? He was going to try and join, but he had another appointment this afternoon. If he's not online, and I don't think he is, then I will certainly ask him if he could do that.
Yeah, I think that would be quite good.
It would be good to circulate to all members, yes.
So we all know what he looks like. Thank you very much for that. And then we move on to item 7, which is the Bigbury Neighbourhood Plan, which members you all have on your screen. And it's recommended that the council approves the making and adoption of the Bigbury Neighbourhood Development Plan. And I believe, Councillor Pearce, you're going to speak on this one.
Yes, members, I'm sorry this is me again, but this does happen to fall into my portfolio. This is the very last day that we could adopt this plan without falling foul of the regulations, which is why I had it put on this agenda and not next week's. Now, the local member did say to me, oh, this is rather a good plan, isn't it? And normally I would expect the local member to say that and say, oh, yes, it is. But actually, this is a really good one. And I would commend you all to read it. They also had a very good examiner, which I think has helped them enormously. And it really gives me great pleasure to recommend the adoption of this neighbourhood plan. I'm happy to take questions, but I know that the local member would like to speak on this as well.
That's absolutely correct. Yes, Councillor Taylor has asked if he could speak. So, Councillor Taylor, would you like to speak next, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As board member from Bigbury, I would like to congratulate the Bigbury Neighbourhood Plan team for their hard work over the last 4 probably plus years to produce a superb plan that is well researched and well presented. And I would like to second the proposal that we adopt this, the council adopt this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Molyneux. Do we have anyone else who wishes to speak?
We do. We've got Councillor Baldry and Councillor Hotwood.
We'll ask Councillor Baldry first then, please.
Chairman, not wishing to be difficult, but I'm trying to read the documents on the South Hams website, and the neighbourhood plan attached to this item is actually Brixton's neighbourhood plan and not Bigbury's.
Oh.
Anyway, I'm very pleased to support. I'm very pleased to support the Bigbury neighbourhood plan. I have looked at it separately, and it is excellent.
Thank you, Councillor Hotwood.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's a shame that this neighbourhood plan is being adopted under these circumstances when usually members of the neighbourhood plan group would be present at the meeting. I read every neighbourhood plan through, and there are for an area that has only I think it was 389 houses in it. I think this is really commendable. The plan is excellent for such a small ward within the South Hams, and these plans are not easy to put together. So I think they really do have gone above and beyond, and they would certainly be one to hold up if there were areas that had small villages and wanted to take a leaf from Bigbury's book. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hotwood.
Got Councillor Brazil would like to speak, Chairman.
Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. Yes, I first of all like to thank both Bernard and her predecessor Beth, who I know were very concerned about some speculative applications in and around these villages, which hopefully this will prevent now. And congratulations for getting it through, and you know, it's very timely. Just one thing, very slight thing, I've sort of speed read through it, but I noticed that in some cases they talk about a development boundary, and in other cases they talk about a settlement boundary. I hope that doesn't lead to some difficulties at a later date where some developer plays funny. So if I just say, so on page page 10, top of page 10, it talks about a settlement boundary, I think, or no, development boundary. And then further on in the document, it talks about settlement boundaries. I think when the maps are they talk about settlement boundaries. So I just think that that's important, that we need to make sure that we're aware of that, and that we feel that it's robust enough in defending any clever developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further speakers?
We have no more speakers.
Yes, can I just come in on that and answer Councillor Brazil's point? Councillor Brazil, I'll make sure Duncan Smith knows about that, because they can put forward a non-material amendment, so to speak, to that, and we can get it sorted out before it's actually published.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Taylor, did you want to add anything further?
No, I just reiterate what everybody said about the way that's been put together and dealt with, and I'll pick up Councillor Brazil's point on settlement boundary and development areas. So perhaps that can be looked at, and then. But I'm happy to go along with it. I always have done, actually, and I've always praised the way that's been put together and dealt with.
Thank you. Thank you. So therefore, members, we will move to the vote on as the recommendation appears on the screen. Over to you, Darryl.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Roberts.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
I'm in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Baldry.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Bastow.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Birch.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Brazil.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Chown.
4.
Councillor Foss. Councillor Foss.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins?
4.
Councillor Hodgson?
4.
Councillor Holway?
4.
Councillor Hopwood?
4.
Councillor Jackson?
4.
Councillor Long?
4.
Councillor May?
4.
Councillor McKay?
4.
Councillor O'Callaghan?
4.
Councillor Pannell?
4.
Councillor Pearce?
4.
Councillor Pringle?
4.
Councillor Reeve?
4.
Councillor Rose?
4.
Councillor Rowe?
4.
Councillor Smurden?
4.
Councillor Spencer?
4.
Councillor Sweet?
4.
Councillor Taylor?
4.
And Councillor Thomas?
4.
That is therefore also unanimous. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Darryl. Thank you. So therefore, members, thank you. That brings us to the end of today's agenda. And I would like to thank you all for taking part in this meeting, which has not been easy. It's the first virtual full council meeting which we've had. We'll be having another one next week, and we can now go and study the agenda that's coming before us for the next meeting. And I would also like to remind you that I think there was a note from Darryl that if you could send him any ideas or views or whatever you have on how we run the meetings, not necessarily the content, but how we run it, and if there are any improvements that could be made, I think that would be great. And also, I'd like to thank you, the members, for all that you're doing within your own areas, within our cluster groups, and we've been doing a lot of work out in the field, and in fact, I think it's been keeping us pretty busy, and also to the staff, and I think particularly to Lisa and her team with all that's been going on with the business rates, the grants, etc. And we have done an enormous number of business rate grants. People have been coming to me and saying, how do they manage to do they qualify? And actually quite a few people who qualify didn't realize they did qualify, and we've helped an enormous number of small businesses, which I think is a great credit to us at South Ham. So I thank you all. I thank all the members of staff in their various departments, which are all working together. They're all mainly working from home, which can't be easy. I know what it's like being locked in at home with a husband who you don't normally spend that much time with. So it's not easy, but I should be thankful I've got a husband, I suppose. He's put up with me for 40 odd years, but I don't know who that is giggling. But anyway, everyone.
Chairman,
Madam Chairman,
I've got a couple of people who would like to comment, if they may.
Okay, right, carry on.
So Councillor Hawkins would like to comment, and Councillor Hopwood would like to make a comment.
If I may, it's just really commenting on what the chairman has already said. Can I just thank Steve and all the team at South Hams Council for doing an excellent job for us. They've been working very, very hard, very efficiently, and I really do sincerely thank you all for doing that. Can I just quickly add also, it's lovely to see and hear members again. I've been missing you all. I can hear from Rose and Hilary on a regular basis, but it's really nice to hear all of the rest of you, and good to hear from David. Many thanks.
Councillor Hopwood.
Thank you, Chairman. Mine was obviously, I don't want to repeat anything, but I will. And apart from obviously thanking officers, which goes without saying, it is really good to hear David May. And at least if we are sort of communicating via video conferencing by Skype for the time, at least David, you can join in. So I wish you well, and I hope your recovery is, or your up to your treatment is going well, and it is good to hear that you're good to hear from you, David.
Yeah.
So say all of us, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I would.
Thank you.
I would.
There's one last comment, Chair, from Councillor Thomas, and then that's it.
Okay.
Mine is aimed at you, Chair. As a parish council chairman, I've chaired my own virtual meeting, and I know how tricky they are. I just wanted to say I thought you chaired our first virtual meeting extremely well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. Yeah, I have to tell you, I have virtually been having nightmares over it. I dreamt last night that I'd lost my iPad and I couldn't find that one before the start of the meeting. And somebody else, I think, had another dream about their iPad. So anyway, we've got through it, and we've made a good foundation to carry on and work in this manner for some time to come, by the looks of it. And we miss our companionship and friendship of all our member friends, but hopefully we will get back together. We will get through this, and we will get back together at some point, and maybe we can have a social event at some point in time. So I thank you all for all that you've done and all that you've said, and I will declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Well done, Rose.